Carbon Elegy, a reading. Alistair. It wasn't so different from the silken wave, Alistair decided silently to himself. Arms leaned slightly across the railing of the crow's nest. Yes, the white peaked tips of the waves and shrill cries of ocean birds had been replaced by the constant, low afternoon buzzing of frogs and insects. The quiet, even pattering of light rainfall against the canvas of the mainsail replaced the salt spray from the last time he'd been on a boat, but this feeling was the same. From this small circular platform, Alistair could see across an endless expanse of the dragon fin. This was the party's best chance to spot incoming threats. He leveled the whorled brass of the fine spyglass against the creaking wood under elbow, bracing against it to steady his view. He had volunteered himself to set up here after the crew took lunch in shifts, eagerly shimmying up the shaking rope ladder here. The rogue made a practiced scan of his surroundings, glass passing over Iris's hair and fur-lined coat that shifted to and fro as the wind blew across the forecastle deck. He panned clockwise. A flash of wings and a mass of two great bodies, below and to the left, beyond that copse of mangroves. He narrowed in, click, 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 the only sound save for the whipping of the heavy ropes against the topmast. The ship creaked gently as great arcane bands hummed silently far below, pushed forward above the great painterly swaths of olive and fern. It was only a moment before Alistair sharply withdrew his spyglass and immediately sent a silent but pointed message to the salt and peppered-haired captain below. An illusion of dragons approaching meant only one thing. The real threat was but a moment or two upon them from somewhere else. Alistair flung his arms around the mast. The ship plunged sharply downward, just as sudden darkness loomed above. Baron Saram Bane barreled down onto the main deck of the Flinthawk, a terrible hurricane of carapace-like scales, 3 great horns, and teeth. Having wrapped both arms onto the mast just a second before the ship's fall, Alistair watched from beyond the sleeves of his teal tunic as the crew and his party were flung back by the impact of the dragon's landing, the wizard only just managing to catch himself on the front bow of the ship to prevent from plunging into the fen. The entire vessel rocked and groaned with the additional weight threatening to list or unbalance. The forest green monstrosity below him let out a roar that shook its way through the ship, and the wooden planks near the main party hissed as acidic droplets began to fall on all those in the area. A flash of red and blue below, Viola slid below the writhing tail and plunged towards the dragon. Alistair's attention pivoted sharply from the chaos on the deck as a dusty horned drake broke through the moody gray above, stabbing him with a cruel-looking stinger, the rogue arresting the momentum of the tip of the spade before whatever sour poison coating it could worm its way into his bloodstream. So close, the whites of the attacker's eyes reflected his blade, and Alistair watched the nostrils of the beast flare greedily as it scented his blood. Below, he heard the cries of combat, but Alistair's ears were listening intently for, yes, a flurry of wings, nearly silent against the rest of the din and only briefly in range. He would have a second or two to manage. A smear of chestnut brown to his right, he flung himself onto the back of the fierce-eyed giant eagle, and Alistair's ears filled with only the strong beating of feathered wings in the air as Shinbira soared. Tetrin. A half-second shimmer in the air. An invisible wave of weight localized to the front bow of the Flinthawk as time slowed around the targets. The hairs on Tetrin's arms raised, and the Taldan grit his teeth and forced his body to resist, to push back against the force he could see pressing an oppressive, leaden thumb upon the backs of Iris, Viola, Krug, and that dragon specialist. Controlling the pace and movement of these rapid-fire skirmishes won or lost battles in a matter of moments. He didn't allow himself to dwell on what would happen if he didn't succeed. He just moved. The Baroness, emerging from below a second after her mate sent Tetrin careening to the front of the vessel, thought to capitalize on the force of entry by handicapping the group's speed. They were fighting coordinated, tightly and tactically, but so would he. Throwing off the final arcane vestiges of Isidor's spell, he gripped the zenith staff in one hand and raised himself by the knees from the railing he had caught himself with, shoulders stinging from the burning acid raining upon him. He leveled the former to Iris and Krog's backs. A strong fighter and the champion would both be pivotal for this fight. Quicken spell. Haste, he whispered. The acid began to sear deeper into his flesh. Tetrin desperately needed to move, but he was blocked by the forms of his allies. Another way, then. Mounting the railing, boots sliding on the planks, he stepped off and plunged into the fen. The quick 1-2 drum of hooves on boards heralded the arrival of the winged horse, Tetrin careening in freefall for but a few seconds before he dropped roughly onto the muscled back of Sixer. He instinctively tucked his legs in tight to the barrel of the Pegasus, muscle memory leaning his body forward and moving his free arm to steady himself on the beast's neck. Sixer shot towards the sky, passing a second figure of Iris flickering in to flank the Baron. There was no time to gauge the battlefield, however, as a blur with wings and a fearful, hook-like maw dropped from the denser cloud cover above, a wild, belligerent cry. Tetrin fought the pain to concentrate on staying mounted on Sixer, though the strake had dug its mandibles deep into his shoulder and back, acrid spittle and rot exuding from where it now clamped on his white kaftan. Alistair was in the sky with him, some type of horned dragon brutalizing the eagle and sinking its claws into Shimbira's chest to prevent escape. The flint hawk had dropped rapidly in a successful gambit to shake Saram from the deck, and there was no time to waste on the relatively minor threat that had his upper chest in a vice grip. Tetrin cast a measured glance around and formed a stratagem. Incapacitate, make distance. He left it howling in laughter with the spell and moved to head down, but a massive shadow from above was faster. The emerald green of the Baron's draconic form, his true form, descended like a storm, but it was the shards of ice-cold malice, pure hatred radiating from the golden eyes of Saram that Tetrin would later remember most. A single, deeply yellowed keratin claw extended towards the wizard's bloodied chest. A single beam, dark as death, crackling with the ability to destroy, emerged from that paw. Tetrin knew that at his current health, surviving the hit was impossible. It promised the end of ends. No body to resurrect, no final gasping breath, only annihilation made form. It whispered through the air, but Tetrin's arm was already moving. He yanked hard on Sixer's crest with his whole body, fistful of rough white hair arcing violently as he forced the barrel of the Pegasus's chest upwards with all his strength. The disintegrate connected. Iris. The cornflower blue ribbon on Viola's blouse ripped violently through the wind generated by a terrible flapping of webbed wings, but Iris felt the swashbuckler's eyes on her for a moment. They shared a nod, preparing to coordinate their next attack. The brief but sudden vacuum of air, however, caused her silvery neck scales to sing in warning just a moment before the crimson monstrosity that was Isidore Bane's draconic form leveled a massive fireball on the deck of the ship. All was alight, including their hastily formed plan. Massive heat roared around Iris, her hair and scales immediately searing and warping. The deck was burning, but Isidore was in range. With a tap of her boots, she darted through the air, materializing on the other side of the Baroness's side, flanking together with Dominic. Isidore was looking towards the front deck, screeching and tossing her thick, scaled neck with possessiveness at the intruders who stepped foot into her fen. She had only a second, but that was all she needed. The red lotus bloomed as it pierced deeply between two plates resting below the neck, a soft pouch holding the creature's breath weapon, Iris's blade arm inserted past the elbow. Unnatural heat burned up her shoulder and tore through her, despite her thick coat insulating her from the worst of the sack's contents. She made sure to twist the blade. Isidore screamed again, and this time, Iris knew it was not in rage alone. Good. Isidore's temperament was like the proud, chellish, demonic war beasts her father loved to speak of, towering over the rank and file. Legionaries were sometimes gifted mounts like these for particularly successful or brutal tours, or for weeding out groups of outcasts, dissidents, or would-be revolutionaries, people like herself. Iris had often imagined what it would look like for one of those creatures to be surrounded, skewered from all sides by soldiers and warriors. It probably looked something like the sight now of Isidore, writhing as Krug's scimitar found purchase in her twisting flesh. A moment later, the deep whistle of a ballista bolt trumpeted suddenly as it grazed the far end of the Baroness's neck. Iris watched the shimmering scales of Isidore's chest begin to dull with dark red, the sharp, coppery scent emanating from her body like a plague. A flash of silver as Viola darted forward, feigning and going for a gouging strike on Isidore's skull as the dragon twisted away. The wounds on her continued to gurgle a choked blood, and Iris made no motion to wipe her face of the hateful visage she was sure she wore. Dominic struck Isidore again, but it was to Iris that the Baroness spun around to, the face of wrath to perfectly pair with Iris's cold sneer. The massive frame, the oddly undulating wings, the not like a dragon face warped and molded by Lamashtu's love and likely some manner of experimentation. All of it was striking, but it was Isidore's face that drew the most attention as it met Iris's gaze. She didn't speak, but the dragon's expression seemed to say, "You revel in seeing bloodshed, yes? Then look upon it." It was Isidore's draconic irises, just barely visible from below the great darkened stripe of carapace that Iris gazed up at. It was her own that would begin to weep, not with emotion, but with blood. Iris's ears, nose, and mouth filled, overflowed. It threatened to drown her. The sounds of the fray were now muffled, as if she were hearing them underwater, and her stomach churned as she fought to get in a breath. A long, clawed paw slammed her down upon the deck. Wicked talons tore deep across her abdomen, her guts spilling upon the wooden planks. She gasped and choked for air. She tried to right herself, but all she could see, all she could hear, was the pounding of blood, the steady, beating pulse of hate. Krug. More than any other, Krug's eyes flickered and darted above the golden point of his emblazoned shield, around the deck and sky, keeping a watchful gaze on his friends. Others would worry about the threats in the sky, but he was no archer or mage. What Krug would do instead, was protect those directly around him despite the massive green dragon near him blocking movement towards the quarterdeck. The calloused hands underneath his bandages were still warm with the healing light of Sarenrae, and the dragon specialist near him was looking sturdier for his help. Isidore turned to face her backside, and a moment later, their newer companion Iris was heaving, although she was blocked from his direct vision. He heard her cry out as the female dragon struck her. Krug made to move, but was forced to turn his attention to his left, upwards. Viola's eyes were trained solely on Isidore, scanning that great form for the thin window to strike. The whistling noise that had caught his attention caused the champion to raise his shield above the head of his companion, just as a sickening crunch slammed straight into it, Krug buckling but holding below. A drake with a claw-like mouth dove down tail first from the gray above, intent on cutting straight through the swashbuckler beside him. It certainly would have done so, if not for the reinforced carapace strapped to his arm. The greater threat, however, was still the Baroness. Krug channeled midday heat into his neck swing, but the bestial folds of Isidore's wings seemed to absorb the hit like a candle cast into a chasm. Somewhere nearby, a screech of pain emitted from another creature as the captain's ballista bolt found its mark. The forest-green visage of the Baron descended as some force barreled into Dominic's form, which still wavered with the morass of Isidore's slow. His massive wingspan loomed. Saram had closed distance with the ship to aid and protect his mate, and with two massive dragons aiming their combined wrath at this group, Krug knew they needed to act now. He drew back his shield arm to pivot, but Viola was already out from under his arm and moving, the phantom copies of her weapon arm and rapier a gold-tipped blur. Isidore turned, understanding too late that this was a feint. A great, rough brushstroke of red arced upon the deck, and Isidore's draconic body plunged into the fen, a twisting black mass. Watching his mate's limp body drop like a stone, Saram Bane let out a roar of pure pain and rage that shook the flinthawk down to the hull. His beady eyes, previously full of calculating intelligence, clouded over. Krug read it immediately. He had seen it on the Dark Moon bandits, Marcellus, and most recently on the faces of many in Cur's Tooth who were slowly dying, left to rot. All creatures drew down this visage across their face like a mourning veil when bereft of the final thing they cared for. This was the time he was the most deadly, but no one else appeared to clock this shift. Above, Alistair and Tetcham were spearheading the assault, flashes of steel and lightning glinting in Krug's peripheral. To his right, Krug noticed in sudden concern that Iris's face and chest were soaked with blood as she swung viciously for the drake still behind him, retching Icar as she moved, and tried to blink through the pouring gore. The Baron swelled, sensing the weakening of Krug's friends nearby, neck already heavy with a deathly green poison. He would release, and it would be over. By the Dawn Mother, a single weak ray of sun emerged from the sky above, frail, tepid, and dim. It was enough. The Baron's breath weapon sack burst in a boom as Krug's blade of searing sunlight burned away the poison, and Bane let out a choked screech as it connected. At that moment, silvery light burst from behind Krug, and he spun around. Blonde hair blew in the wind. Viola. It wasn't from lack of bravery. As Isidor's form fell into the swamp, the retching noise that emitted from the Baron was deeply primal, and an ancient fear took root in Viola's chest as if forcing her lungs closed. Her grip on the handle of the flying heron became slick even through her gloves. Her blouse and vest, wet with rain, clung to her arms in the humidity of the afternoon. Viola attempted to master the frantic, uneven beating of her heart. She looked straight towards the Baron, as he formed a sigil of sorts in her direction. Her thoughts muddled. Her mind became silt and algae kicked up from the bottom of a shallow pool disturbed by the sole of a boot. Someone very near her shouted, in pain or perhaps alarm. In the peripheral of her mind, Viola registered sounds and movement, the crushing of thunder above, steel rending against flesh, the slamming of weight against a shield, an odd buckling noise, and the screech of a bird. It was all happening so slowly, and through it all, a woolen static muffling all other sound and sensation. She was surprised to notice that her eyes had closed, a final attempt to recenter herself. Seeing nothing but flashes of scenes, Viola's chest rose as she took a breath in, marbles glinting in the sun, a spider's tapestry of silken tensions, a grand hall with golden pillars, bone-white shards protruding from the surf. Deep violet jacquard of a dress's hem holding back the blackness of oblivion. A small hawk that darts out to meet a thin black beam. Slow and ponderous, she began to exhale, and these half-seen things dissolved as a deeply rich voice filled her. A warm sensation like an embrace traveled down her sword arm and into her rapier. Viola opened her eyes. The form of a dead drake, another burying its mandibles against Iris, the Ganzi's body slumped against the deck, even as Krug's shield protected her head from the brunt of the bite. Viola held her arm up to the soft rain still falling. Rapier pointed skyward, and somehow she knew it would take her there. She found herself aloft, flanking the Emerald Mountain from its spade. Alistair lay dying or unconscious upon the deck. The captain was astride Chimbira, Iris conscious again and pulsing with a burning bulwark. The fear was still present, heartbeat frantic. Her stupefied state remained water-disturbed underfoot. Her mind clouded, her body threatened to stiffen. An enraged and massive beast lied in front of her. So she became the only thing she still knew she was. All in the background faded away. Leading steps, the beat of the back and forth. Viola's body manifested the instinctive duelist she molded herself into, had thrown away her old self to become. She did not think, just moved, boots stepping beyond fear, beyond mortality. A massive black horn with bloodied gold bands swung out like a halberd. She ducked and struck against the dark green scales. Her body moved to the rhythm of battle. A drake fell dead in the background. An arrow from conscious Alistair found a near impossible mark between Bane's two armored front horns. Viola was only shaken from her reverie by the popping and spitting of electricity from the staff, guided to the same spot the metal of the arrowhead remained buried in the Baron's skull, striking down into Rum like a storm's judgment. The great worm fell. Later, while trying to recall, Viola could only remember snippets of the next few minutes, the mending of wounds, quiet conversation, a brief negotiation. She could only really recall Tetrin's face, an unreadable hardness in his eyes. He leveled the zenith staff towards the hulking green body. It blackened, and the late Baron's body disintegrated, a fog of ash lifting into the wind, a singing carbon elegy.